distinguished lectures series. And we've had a variety of types of seminars. We've had really distinguished speakers when we first started, like the director of the NIVIB, and many folks that are on the California Academy of Bioengineering gave talks. And we kicked off this second year with a couple of panel discussions on career paths for graduate students and postdocs and undergraduates. That took up a couple of our panels, and we're starting this new series with Tejal Desai, who is the Sorensen Family Dean of Engineering at Brown University. So not just a bioengineer, but actually in charge of all of those departments. And she just started about 6 months ago at Brown. Before that, she was the chair of bioengineering at UCSF, and also ran a number of different programs at UCSF, including the Applied Sciences Initiative, or HIVE, which was an innovation initiative. She's also a member of the California Academy of Bioengineering, which is a distinguished group, all of whom are on the National Academy and that work within our discipline. And we thought today we'd have Tejal talk about, first of all, her science a bit, and then also about her advocacy in leadership. And this is really timely because Tejal and several of us just authored a paper on leadership pathways that was the result of an Amy workshop. And she'll probably talk a little bit about that. But in any case, we're really trying to focus a little bit on how it is for females in moving up in the discipline to take on leadership positions like chairs and deanships as well. And so without further ado, let me just hand it off to Tejal, who's not only a friend and a colleague, but sort of been a mentor as well, especially in this area. So Tejal, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. It's great to be here. And as I told Scott, being part of the UC and the California Academy of Bioengineering is just it's been a huge honor to be part of that, and also just to be part of this group that is so actively promoting bioengineering and inclusive excellence. So this is a little different than sort of a normal scientific talk, and I thought I would really just spend about 20 minutes or so sharing a little bit about my journey. The question that was asked was sort of, how did you move from science to chairing to dean? And I'm going to share with you that it's actually, in some ways, not really a move, but really sort of parallel journeys that finally sort of coalesced at the end. So I will share my screen, and then I think we're going to, after my talk, we're going to open it up for questions. And also we have a distinguished group of faculty who will join me to talk about their experiences.
Thanks for bringing that part up. I forgot to introduce all the other folks on the screen, and they'll introduce themselves after you give your talk, which is going to be about 25 minutes or so. Also, I'd like to introduce Li Hong Wang, who's the co-chair of the committee that helps put on these lectures. So without further ado, you take it away, and then in 25 minutes or so, we're going to open up this panel where we can address folks' questions in the Q&A session, and also just have a discussion amongst ourselves. Thanks.
Great. So today I'm going to be talking about a little bit about my journey, which is entitled A Fantastic Voyage, for those of you who've ever watched a really old movie about nanotechnology in the body, really, which was inspiration for me when I was very young, starting to pursue bioengineering. But really this intersection between nanoengineering, advocacy, and leadership, which I feel are really central to who I am and who I hope to be as I'm sort of continuing my career. What I wanted to start with was first, just a little bit about myself, because I think it gives you context into how I got started on this journey. And I think as a woman in science, one of the things I realize is it's so important to have those people behind you who are both supporting you and advocating for you. And so I was inspired quite early on to really think about science, think about both science and advocacy. And this came about through many different channels. One, I'm a daughter of immigrants. My parents settled in California in the early, I guess, mid 60s, and so I actually was born and raised in California and grew up here. Also went to a very large public school where I was one of very few Asian Americans at that school, which was close to sort of, either Hispanic or white, but also a large socioeconomic range within a school. And so very early on, I felt like in order to make change, in order to make sure that everyone was inclusive and included in science, that we had to be active parts of our community. And so I was really lucky because I had a science teacher who, got me on that path very early on. And in fact, she nominated me to be part of an NSF program for girls in science. And so all the things that we do as faculty members is sort of, on the other side where we're writing those proposals for NSF, it really does matter. And I think many of you probably had that experience, but I certainly wouldn't be in bioengineering if I hadn't have gone to this program, because it gave me a glimpse, my first glimpse into what a biomedical engineer could do, and also gave me a chance to meet role models. And with that, also showed me the power of making sure that we could have science programs, we could have support for science programs in order to get everybody into the pipeline. And I actually went to college knowing I wanted to be a biomedical engineer, which is, I think, kind of strange that I'm doing this 40 years, maybe 40 years later? No, 30 years later, no, not that old. But I actually chose Brown, the same place I am now, as an undergrad, because they were one of the few programs that had biomedical engineering. But the other piece of that is that I wanted to be at a place where I could do a lot of advocacy and sort of, I guess, satisfy my activism conscience. And so this is probably one of the important things in terms of shaping my career, where not only did I do biomedical engineering on one side, I also did sociology and political science on the other side. And because of that, I began to do things that really looked at institutional change when I was in college. Something that when I sort of look back on made me understand the importance of a university, the importance of what change could be made at a university, but also my role in it. And so I was really active in trying to bring more students from disadvantaged backgrounds or historically underrepresented backgrounds to Brown. I was also very involved in creating infrastructure and community to support those students, including myself, because I was repeatedly told that engineering might not be right for me. So this was, what my advisor said, what my some of my concentration advisors mentioned, because I sort of had some of the background. I was interested in engineering, but I didn't have all of the coursework that they thought would be, sort of central to being successful in engineering. That, I think, again, was a really motivating part of my journey, because somebody said I couldn't do it. I was sort of disheartened, thinking about, okay, well, I can do this other stuff. I can do political science. I can do some of the other work that I did, but I really want to solve problems. And how can I do that? And so what allowed me to stay in the field was finding a mentor. And as an undergraduate, I found a mentor who took me into her lab, a mentor who sort of reinforced my confidence in being a scientist. But more importantly, really got me to think about what I was learning in the classroom and its relevance to how I could actually make a difference in society. And it was my first exposure to drug delivery. And for those of you who know what I do, I do a lot in drug delivery, and really it was because of this early exposure to Professor Mathiowicz, who let me into her lab as a second-year student to basically feed the rats, which was not that exciting, but I loved it. And I also saw that you could feed rats different types of polymers, and those polymers would deliver different therapeutics in a way that could change their livelihood. And I say this because finding a mentor has been a theme that's been sort of repeated over and over again during my journey. As an undergrad, I started to work in some of the areas around biodegradable materials and bioerodible polymers. So again, it was fortuitous because I was part of some really early studies looking at how you could use different types of polymers, be it alginates or things like polyanhydride microspheres, all of the types of biodegradable materials that we now sort of commonly think of in the field. And that experience, even though I didn't do so well in my classes those first few years, really helped me improve my academic trajectory and allowed me to go to graduate school. Graduate school happened at UCSF and UC Berkeley. And I will tell you, even as a graduate student, I was very involved in how do we, again, sort of make sure that our community is involved. I worked for the Science Education Partnership, which was in the San Francisco school system. And so every Friday, I spent those Fridays in middle schools teaching science. And what's interesting is that, there was sort of a set of people saying, didn't that take away from your science that you did in the lab? And I have to say what it actually did was allow me to be a better educator and a better communicator of science. And so, again, not sort of saying that I had to do science on one side and then do other stuff on the other side, but how do we bring those things together? One of the things that I learned in graduate school that I think I've sort of carried forward is the fact that I learned how to take risks and go in sort of new directions that maybe I had not been trained for, or that were not directly things I would have foreseen. And it was really that time when I was in graduate school that this area of nanotechnology was coming into being. Microchips were really hot. Silicon technology was going strong at a place like Berkeley. And I ended up joining a group that actually had no experience in biology. I was the first biomedical engineer in that group. But what there was this vision that perhaps we can develop devices and silicon-based materials that would go into the body. And, many people said, including in this case, my thesis advisor, that it's a pretty risky project. It might not come to fruition. You might not graduate. But again, knowing that there were people who were around me to support me, I sort of jumped into it because it was exciting to think about what could be the future. And so the challenge that I came into this field with was how to combine sort of micro and nanotechnology with cell biology, circa 1994. And in those early days, they were very separate. So everything that was done in a clean room would never touch biology, and everything in biology would never touch a clean room. But what I was able to learn by what I had done as an undergrad and now bringing it back to what was happening at Berkeley was that we could actually bring those fields together. And so from a very simple concept of, can you create a sort of capsule that holds living cells? And this was a silicon-based sensor material to be able to then put that inside a body allowed me to create and sort of be part of this new revolution of biomedical nanotechnology. That led to, papers in sort of a new field, led to books in this sort of area of therapeutic micro and nanotechnology. You can see my co-author of this book, Sangeeta Bhatia, because she's sort of somebody I looked up to, but she was sort of blazing a trail for this area as well. And I think what was sort of the take home was that the fact that I jumped into a new field allowed me to then be able to position myself to go into some directions that hadn't been foreseen before. That sort of circa 1998 biomedical technology really sort of served as the underpinning of my career. And I say that because just as I was graduating from my PhD, sort of finishing up, it turned out that that was a time where universities were starting to create biomedical engineering departments. It was a time where now people were interested in biomedical nanotechnology or biomems. And at that point, there weren't really a lot of people doing that. And so I say that because sometimes we have to think about what's coming in the future and take a little bit of a leap of faith in order to position ourselves to go after those things. So I ended up joining actually a bioengineering department where I was the first hire straight out of a PhD program. And again, a pretty risky move. People said I should do a postdoc, which I think wouldn't have been bad at all. It would have been great. But I had this real desire to build something new. And so I went to the University of Illinois, Chicago. I helped build that department. It was almost like a startup. I worked with the chair really closely and developed an undergraduate curriculum and a graduate curriculum and built research around biomedical nanotechnology. That move led to a move to Boston University, where I helped them launch a new center in biomedical nanotechnology that was funded by the Whitaker Foundation, which was a large philanthropic organization that was really helping to spur biomedical innovation. And it really helped me make these connections I wouldn't have otherwise made. But while I did that, there were certainly challenges. At that time, I was probably one of two women in the School of Engineering, certainly at University of Illinois, Chicago. I was trying to build a department, but also do research. And I was also trying to sort of establish myself in a new field that was just getting off the ground. But the way I was, I think, very lucky in that I had people who were sort of looking after me all around the country in some ways. And so I feel very fortunate because I had mentors that not only were sort of part of my journey to get where I was, but sort of continued to follow me in that journey. About 8 years after I started as a professor, I actually got a call from another mentor of mine, you can see sort of this theme that keeps coming up. This was a mentor that I had in graduate school who was at UCSF, who I never worked with, but I often just talked about sort of where I wanted to go with my science. And she had actually followed me through my time at University of Illinois, my time at Boston University, and said, we're starting a new bioengineering, or we hope to start a new bioengineering department at UCSF. And you were at Berkeley, you were in this joint program, and we've seen you building programs. Would you be interested in coming back? And to me, her call and her sort of faith in me led me to sort of say, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to build, but I also want to do science, and also bring science back to a place which had a lot of clinical interactions. And so I was lucky enough to then be recruited back to UCSF. And I really use that as an opportunity to go further in my science, to make those collaborations on the clinical side that I I wanted to try to translate things out of the lab. I got to actually learn a lot about leadership in creating a new department. So I wasn't just joining a department, I was actually now creating it. And also began to think about how we could take what we were doing in the lab and actually get it out to the clinic, get it out to commercialization. And then with all of that, being at a place like UCSF, realizing sort of who was part of the conversation and how important scientific funding and scientific diversity was, being able to have a platform to continue that advocacy. And so I say this because I don't think I would have foreseen any of these things and these different moves that I made. But in each place, there was an opportunity to do more on the science, but also how could I change sort of what we were building alongside of that. So this really, I think, sort of allowed me to create the lab that I now have, which is the Desai lab for therapeutic micro and nanotechnology, where we're really interested in how we create materials to manipulate biological processes. And we, stemming back from my early work, which was sort of that intro to drug delivery, to what I did with cell technology and cell encapsulation, we're really interested in how you develop materials that can change and perturb biological barriers and boundaries. And I'm not going to talk about the science. What I learned from my experience at UCSF, and I think what also helped me get to the dean level and why I took that, was the fact that in order to make these types of technologies actually have meaning, it involves a lot of collaborations. Collaborations with scientists and clinical scientists, collaborations. And so I learned to really collaborate across campuses and across people. And with that, I was able to create lots of different types of devices and materials that allowed us to then commercialize what we were doing. And we developed things like stent technologies, films for drug delivery to the eye, oral delivery devices. And to this day, my lab still is now interested in how do those materials actually affect biology. So one thing I can't sort of not mention is that along this journey, I also had to really think about how motherhood contributed to both the science and the advocacy and the leadership. And I like to say the phrase that one of my dear friends, Lola Aniola Adefeso, says, which is, it's not about work-life balance or sort of life compartmentalization. For me, it's about how do you integrate life into everything you're doing. And so I have 3 children, and trying to, sort of do these different types of things while raising a family has been something that's been both a challenge, but also a way to prioritize the types of things that I enjoy doing versus those things that I don't, but also to sort of see and gain inspiration from them, because every time I do science, every time I think about how do we create a better, more inclusive department or an initiative, I think about what is the impact on the next generation. But it also allowed me to sort of think about 4 key things. One is dealing with unexpected challenges that are thrown your way. How to keep out the noise, because lots of people are telling you things, and you really have to, sort of stay true to your values. Setting limits. I had one of my children has learning differences, and so I had to leave at 3 p.m. every day to take him to the therapist, and I learned to do that as a chair and sort of prioritize what was important, and then defining those priorities and values, as I said. So my voyage did involve many different crisscrosses, and that's actually a luxury that I was able to partake in, because I had support from my family, support from my partner, and it's now led me even though I already crisscrossed a few times back to the East Coast. And so where I'm sort of starting in full circle to be a dean. And I think what I've learned and why I believe I was able to sort of take this role on is that it's always been about how do you integrate both, right? Sort of advocating for science and doing science, but also about people. How do we create the community that we want? And so as I think about where I am now, which is as a Dean of Engineering, I also reflect on some of what we've been talking about over this last several years about women who are in the academic leadership pipeline. And how do we keep women sort of on this track? Because it's those leaders who are going to help us create even more robust communities and pipelines. And actually, we don't do a great job within academia in terms of, ascending the ladder. And this goes to one of the articles that Scott talked about that'll be published around this topic. But even in politics or Hollywood or sort of other areas, there's actually been more traction than there has in academic leadership. That doesn't, it shouldn't dissuade us, but I think it also says there's a lot of work to be done. And how can we have the discussions and the dialogues to actually keep us, continuing to make strides in this arena? And so I think one of the things, and we know this, is that your scientific identity is important. And so I think seeing people who both persist in STEM, but also are aligning with some of the values that you share is really important to keep this pipeline and to keep us on the track to creating more diverse and inclusive science. And so, lots of people have studied this, so I won't sort of belay the point, but I think, again, the more that we can encourage our trainees to keep going on this journey, the more that we can hopefully create this sort of equitable inclusion. So a few final thoughts before I would love to hear and open up from everybody is, so first of all, find really good mentors and collaborators, both inside and outside of your institutions. And these mentors do not need to be in the same field. They do not need to be sort of sharing the types of work you do. They need to be people that you can talk to. And there may be many different kinds of mentors. Sarah Nelson was a radiologist, but she was also a leader. And so I really went to her about that. I've had other mentors who talked to me about other parts of my career. And don't be afraid to take risks. And I know that's easier said than done. But I think, again, if you surround yourselves with the mentors and those who will advocate for you, you have more of the ability to take those risks both scientifically, but also as a leader. And in doing so, being able to do that without sacrificing your values. And finally, of course, work that we all share is to create inclusive teams that are open to new ideas. And so I am going to stop sharing, and then hopefully we can open this up and just have a really informal chat and hear about some of the other questions and journeys that are present here. Thanks,
Tejal. That was awesome. I knew a lot of that stuff, but not all of it. What I'd like to do, both Lihang and I now, is start to the left of my screen and have the panelists introduce themselves, and then just open up a conversation of leadership, and in particularly female leadership. I think BME has maybe a jump on some of the other engineering disciplines, but I think we could still go a much farther away. Emily, you're the first one on my screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Roncalli. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. I do have a joint appointment with the Department of Radiology at UC Davis. So different people, different sometimes goals, not always aligned. I was trained in France, which is my home country, and I came after my PhD for my postdoc at UC Davis. lighted enough to stay as a scientist before I applied for faculty positions and got this one. So I think a lot of things that you've said today resonate with my own path in biomedical engineering, which was not existing actually when I was studying. There was no department of biomedical engineering in France at that time. I think we'll come back to questions, so I'll stop here.
Thanks, Kamala. Yeah. And I also would add that you have 2 kids that also keep you challenged.
I have 3.
Oh, you have 3 kids. I'm sorry. Feng Yuan, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Feng Yuan, and I just started my lab during COVID, so best time ever. So another layer of challenge. I also thanks Desai for the amazing talk. I really have a lot of feeling like the same journey. I actually also grew up in Asia, so grew up in China, and I travel even more as I did my part of my bachelor and PhD in Paris, and then in the US. So it's like 20 years in Asia, 10 years in Europe, and then another many years here, longer, I guess. And also I started training as physicist. My project was at the semiconductor at the beginning and gradually challenged myself to biomedical engineering. So I really, really appreciate you telling your story because I can see myself further in the future in the journey. Yeah. So that's basically me, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to have me here.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute. Muriel, you can just tell us a little about yourself, and you're at Caltech, right?
No, I'm here. I'm at UCLA. I'm in bioengineering at UCLA. That's right.
Zita, you're at Caltech. Yeah. Muriel, tell us a little about yourself.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for the invitation to be part of a panelist as well. And thank you for a wonderful talk, Tejal. Again, it mirrors my own experience. My background, I'm currently an assistant professor in UCLA in bioengineering. It's my 3rd month on the job, so I'm quite new. And my training is actually in chemistry. I started my PhD at Berkeley. So I'm very familiar with the Berkeley CSF Bioengineering program. I know my friends were part of that. And I was in the lab that was doing a lot of chemistry. And then my project eventually, moved into more biomedical applications. And then my postdoctoral really cemented that direction for me. So yeah, I'm happy to talk more and I have a few questions for you, actually.
Awesome. Yishu, other faculty from UC Davis.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you, Scott, for the invitation. My name is Yixu. I'm an assistant professor in biomedical engineering at UC Davis. I also have we run by graduate group, so I'm also a member of the graduate group in electric and computer engineering. So my background is also not originally from biomedical engineering because, biomedical engineering is so diverse and interdisciplinary field. So I was originally trained in optical engineering back to China in my undergraduate. And then I went to MIT for mechanical engineering, actually, to learn about optics and the microscope. And then I also go to UC Berkeley to do computer engineering and computational imaging. And now I'm in UC Davis and in biomedical engineering, so use all the knowledge I have learned in optics, in biology, and also in computer science to integrate them all together and make fantastic microscope. That is my goal. So I think I learned a lot from your talk just now, and it's very interesting to learn your long journey. And I think I echo a lot of the experience you had, and think that's really shine a light for me to see what I should looking for in next 10 years probably, or next few years, I would say. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jen Wilson. I'm also an assistant professor at UCLA. I guess most of the way through my second year. I think time flies. But thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the opening talk. I really appreciated the messaging about mentorship and just like how much that matters through the career, and just wanted to echo the importance of mentors outside of science also. And then maybe just to start the conversation for after, I guess I'd add one more piece of that, of one of my favorite pieces of advice from Ruth Bader Ginsburg is learning to when to be a little deaf. So you'll hear people who criticize or like make it hard for you, and it takes a little while to calibrate, but there's a point in which your life you learn to tune out the wrong information, and that is part of the like finding the right mentorship part. So like that was something I thought about when you were presenting. So thanks again for having me here.
And last but not least, Azita, our one outside of UC Caltech alum.
Yes, Caltech. Hi, everyone. It was fantastic to hear about your journey, Tejal. Thank you for having me today. I hope my connection is not too bad. I'm a professor of electrical engineering and medical engineering at Caltech. I'm more senior than others here. I've been at Caltech for 15 years. But I was very much involved in creation of medical engineering department. And today our department chair is here, Li Hong Wang. Thank you for inviting me. Currently, I'm the head of the department for electrical engineering, the first female department head for electrical engineering. But I also have served as the equivalent of deputy dean for School of Engineering at Caltech. And it's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed hearing about your journey, Tejal.
Awesome. Well, let's just open the panel here for discussion. You know, it's such a diverse, sorry, it's my dog. For such a diverse group. And do any of you guys have ambitions to become, you know, chairs? Obviously, you already achieved that, Azita, or dean, and do you have worries about doing so? Or, yeah, I mean, mentors are great. Are probably one of the most important things, and we have one here.
I think there were, I think somebody said they had a question, and maybe we could start out with that. One of the.
Or do you want someone to read the questions from the chat too, the Q&A?
Yeah, Scott and I have a plan. Scott, do you want to start with question number 1, which is a short one?
Why don't you do it? Because I'm having trouble seeing them on my screen.
Okay, I can do all the questions. I don't mind reading them. Yeah, the first question is a single sentence. How do you find mentors who are willing to help you advance your career and support your science?
I will leave it. I mean, I think everybody can answer this. You know, I can just start with, you know, it's definitely not the first person you talk to. And I think it takes time to find the right ones, the ones that, you know, and it may be over many years that relationship develops. So at least for me, it wasn't that I suddenly said, I want you to be a mentor, and it just sort of happened. It was a very natural, organic process where I felt comfortable with that person, but that person was also comfortable in sort of telling me, you know, things that maybe I should hear, you know, in a way that, you know, was sort of supportive, but also, you know, helped me make the right choice. So I think it is not something where you're automatically just going to find them, but I think for everybody you come in contact with to really sort of think about them and whether they would make a good mentor.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah, Azita, please. Yeah, I also see.
Sorry, I didn't see.
Go ahead, please, Azita. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree. The more you talk to people, the chances that you find that person that you click with goes higher. And if you ask questions from more senior people in your department and outside of the department, you gradually get a sense of who can be a good mentor. The best is to have a lot of connections and talk to other people, and also ask about who can be a good mentor from others. sometimes you can get suggestions from others who are in the department or who already have mentors.
I have a little tricks here. So what the way I do, I also recommend my students do is talk with the PI for sure, for mentor, but also talk with their students and alumni if you have the opportunity. Normally people list those people there. So it's really like, talk to the PI for one thing, but at the meantime, you have to check what's the real life likes in the lab. So definitely talk to their current mentees. And also check the alumni. What's the next step of alumni? That also shows like how supportive the PI could be. So that's my common tricks to do. Yeah.
Good suggestion. Emily, do you have any comments?
Right. I think for me as well, it works in a very organic way. I never really clicked in programs where you're paired with someone because it takes time to build this relationship. I think mentors also evolve with time. You don't need all the time the same thing. So I do have multiple people who I refer to depending on what's going on and what type of help I need and issues I'm facing. So I think it's a very dynamic process for me. And same with the people I help. It varies because sometimes they need more of my help, sometimes they need me as a mentor, sometimes they need me more as a sponsor, which is quite different actually.
Great. Any more comments from the panel?
I think I would like to just summarize or adding a little bit of my opinion, because I think it depends on what's the scenario, the question, the person who bring up this question, like depends on what's career status she or he is, because the mentor for the like a trainee or pre-doctoral students, I think that's a little bit different from the mentor for the PI or like early career faculty. So I think Bangyuan just said is about like how PhD students probably can find a good mentor, and I agree that asking for the students, see how the PI goes and how the environment look like. And in terms of for early career faculty to find a mentor, I think my case is quite similar to Emily. Although I have formally set the mentor, but we didn't really have a formal that kind of schedule or like program that we draw in. It's more like we just say we are mentor-mentee, this kind of relation. So I think I like this flexible thing because everyone is so busy, and if I have the need or and I need help, I need support, I can just contact them and they are super helpful. But I don't think it's necessary to have a regular schedule to check in what I'm doing or this kind of thing. So I think it's really case by case and depends on. It's really about a person like a relationship, and find a way that both the mentor and the mentee feel comfortable with and most productive. I think that's the key in my point.
Great, thank you. Any more comments on the first question? Sorry, I forgot to mention that the first question was raised by Shreya Ramesh.
I'll add something brief. One, maybe just don't get discouraged. The person that should be your mentor doesn't match with you. Keep talking to people, because sometimes you often think the next person in the chain of command is like the one who should have the right advice. And if it just doesn't click, it doesn't click. So trust your instincts, but don't get discouraged if that doesn't work out right away, because you don't need everyone to mentor you. You just need a few good people.
Great. Any more comments? All right, maybe we can move on to the second question, which was raised by Hannah O'Toole. It's very detailed. Let me just read it out loud. Thank you, Dr. Desai, so much for sharing your voyage. I find you very inspiring, especially because I'm also a student in a new lab with a quote unquote risky nanoengineering project. The concept of quote engineering might not be right for me, unquote, has also been said to me, and has also been a drive for me to think about student attrition from STEM, especially with URM students. You said that you were involved both from a recruitment and retention standpoint. Can you give me any specific examples of how you did this so we can have some more inspiration here at UC Davis, BME, for our own DEI committee? I look forward to meeting you at a UC Davis Chemical Biology Program retreat in a few weeks.
I didn't know you're going to be here in a few weeks. That's great.
I know I'm going to be in Napa, but anyway. Oh gosh. Well, thank you for that really kind note. So I think this is this is what we're all struggling with in some ways, right? This is not an easy challenge. Just how do we keep people in the field? How do we create those structures to really support all of us? And I would say for me, that is actually one of the reasons that I wanted to be, I don't know if I wanted to be a dean, but it sort of allowed me to think about, okay, what can I accomplish as a dean? Which is, I could really think about institutional structures, sort of what is the culture of engineering? How do we deliver that curriculum? What are the messages that we're sending to sort of first years about, I remember when I was in engineering, that first, like in your first intro to engineering class, and this might be common, I don't know if it's still done, but it was sort of look to your right, look to your left, and half of you won't be here in 4 years. And that was said in the classroom. So it was really this expectation that not everybody succeeds when you start engineering. And so I think for me, that needs to definitely shift, right? And I think we're doing a better job in biomedical engineering. And I can't speak to all the other areas, but I certainly know, even in my own institution, that that's a cultural shift that's been happening over many years, and that I would like to be, you can choose not to do engineering, but it shouldn't be because there are barriers or roadblocks. It's because you chose it from your own volition, not because somebody made you feel like you couldn't do it.
Yeah, lowering the barrier, getting more people in.
Right.
I guess there was another question from Hannah, and it's for Dr. Camariza. How did you choose your postdoc to transition you from more chemistry-heavy research to more biological? Was it based on clinical implications, biological questions, application of your chemistry, background to a biological field, none of the above? But how did you do it? How did you transition?
This is a very good question. I was just thinking about that. I was really lucky because I was in the chemical biology program at UC Berkeley, actually. And so while my research and my proposal was inherently a chemistry proposal, there was the expectation that this would eventually land into a biological application. And so everybody, my thesis committee, my thesis advisor, we all knew that that's eventually where we hoped to be. Sort of similar to what we were learning in the talk before this. And so I was very lucky that my project, right after we synthesized some of these compounds and biosensors, it very quickly delved into how well they work in biological systems and complex biological cell solutions and environments. And it eventually got into even some clinical work with patient samples. So when I was graduating and I was thinking about what my choices were for what I could do in my postdoc, I was really lucky that I got an independent postdoc position that allowed me to actually explore even further the biomedical application and the clinical application side of sort of these chemical tools that we're building. And so when I came to deciding where I wanted to be, I wanted to learn more from people from different fields. So I ended up joining a viral and viral sequencing and viral genomics lab where they had actual field work. And I got to enter that network, go through those conferences and meet wonderful mentors that, got me where I am today.
Yeah.
I wonder if other panelists have any insight to offer on the same question.
Sure. I'm not from chemistry, but I also did a big transition, as I mentioned. I was a physicist and then gradually moved to the biology side. So my story is Actually, when I was high school or like younger, physics seems more fun because in the textbook, when you learn something, it's like a very simple but really beautiful equation can explain what I can see in the real world, right? Even like frictions, how fast, the speed, everything is explained by a single equation. I feel like this is amazing. So I definitely want to do my research in this area. But then starting from undergraduate is when I really start to join like a lab research. It might not be very proper to say that if we have physicists here, but I start to feel like what's in the real lab research for physics is the opposite, because whatever is beautifully like a field is already in the textbook. So whatever left is really, really difficult. It's either in the astrophysics area or in the quantum physics. It's either really big, really small, like a scale, which means you need like a few hundred people to solve a big problem, which is kind of a different style from what I feel from a textbook. So biology is the opposite. When I was a high schooler, I hate biology. It's like you have to memorize things. There's no logic. There's no reason. This is nuclear. This is cytoplasm. You don't have like explanation. You just have to memorize those things.
Yeah.
But then when I start to do research, it's the opposite. It's like I'm writing my own textbook, because anything in biology is not clear, honestly. Anything is unclear. So you can have your own experiment you set up and you get really excited. Oh, this is how thing works. So I feel like this is how I start to see my passion. And then I gradually move to the biology. So it could be a little bit personal, but I think the whole point is what's more important, especially when you're at the training period, is you can get trained in different areas and find your own passion. And I can guarantee you what you got during this training, even my physics background, benefit my daily work still. It's not like I learned my quantum physics for nothing, because everything you work today is very interdisciplinary. Even if you are not quantum physics at all, nowadays you're training your research philosophies. Even if you set up collaborations, you know that particular language. So everything you learned in the trail definitely helps. And also you can also have the chance to try different things and find your real passion. So that's my story.
Very interesting. So someone told me that in physics, whenever you have a closed form solution, the objects must be small and round.
Yeah.
But I also very much related with what you said, because I also loved physics when I was in high school, and then but then I went into electrical engineering because it was very close to physics. I loved electromagnetism and everything about electrical engineering, basically. And I studied microelectronics, integrated circuits, microchips. But then I realized that I can expand and I can start collaborating with physicians and build micro devices for biomedical applications. But what it really takes is to go a little bit outside of your comfort zone and take some risk to enter a new field, and be careful not to reinvent the wheel, because people have been in the field for a long time, and then you enter into that field and it takes a lot of studying and understanding where things are to be able to do something new. Definitely it's not easy, but it's very rewarding and you keep learning.
Yeah. So it seems to me like the future is really bright. For bioengineering in particular, so many different routes you can get here, but no shortage of really important problems to solve. And I don't know, different than physics, it seems like we could build little, PDMS-based devices and solve big problems without having to have lasers and, extreme pressures to produce superconducting materials, right? You don't really need that to understand how a cell moves.
At the same time, it's very hard to make things that can work in vivo in a very the environment that is very difficult and different for engineers.
Yeah, we're still learning about that, how to do that. So, Going back to the leadership part of this, I think one of the real challenges, and I think what we address in that article they're going to come out next month, I think, or maybe this month in Annals of Biomedical Engineering Education is opening areas, opening doors more in, at the top level. I mean, networking and mentorship is one way for that to happen, but there needs to be a commitment. I think that's one thing we mentioned in the article, right? A commitment from not only the women that are at the top, but for sure the men, because they hold a lot of those doors of power up there. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Tejal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also was going to say that, your mentors don't need to also, be all women or men. I mean, they can be whoever you feel like will provide that support. So that's one thing that I think is important to note. For a leadership, you absolutely need to have buy-in from everybody. It's not it's very hard to do any of this if you're sort of going at it alone. And so I think, as Scott said, when we were thinking about leadership, it's not, there's the intent, and then there's actually, right, what's backing it up, which are people who are going to put in the time and the effort. And then I also think the processes. One of the things I'm learning a lot about is how the processes that are in a given institution can really lead to very different outcomes depending on how they're set up. And so really having the ability to think about, what are the types of search committees that are put together? What are the sort of stages of interviewing and collecting letters and things like that? Where do you go out to recruit? And that, of course, we know it, I think, at the faculty level, but even as you think about the leadership level, it's the same thing, because, in fact, your pool gets smaller and smaller. And so you have to be able to go outside of sort of your friends, if you will. You have to really look broadly. And that's something that I think is very important.
Yeah.
Sorry, we forgot to introduce Song. Song is the department chair at UCL's BME department.
He took over from me as the new director for the Bioengineering Institute of California that puts on the summer conference and also helps direct the California Academy of Bioengineering, which is in an overarching umbrella group. And they represent a bunch of potential mentors too. And that's one of the reasons we sort of incorporated it, because, having forums like this and trying to, and hopefully connecting more to the California Academy at large, it opens those doors. In any case, you guys are all now, by face buddies, right? I'm sure Tejal is open to communicating with any of you guys or some of the other senior folks like Azita, having folks from my department, Emily and Yi, being able to communicate with her. That's the other reason the California Academy tried to really bridge more of some of the other bioengineering programs outside of UC. And we're going to continue to try and do that. Song, any closing words?
I want to thank Tejal for this wonderful talk, and all the panelists for sharing their thoughts and experiences. And I also want to thank Scott and Li Hong for hosting such a great webinar. And thank you all very much.
And like I said, and Song did at the beginning, all of these lectures are on Zoom, and we're going to put on YouTube for archival, where you can get a hold of them just with a click, and listen to your guys' journeys and help guide their own. So thanks, Tejal. I guess we'll see you in Napa in a few weeks. You definitely do hop skip across the country quite a few times a year these days.
I'm especially just waiting for the winter to be over.
Yeah, we're waiting for the rain to be over.
I also want to just say, I mean, it's so amazing to see all of the faces here, and I think the field is in good hands if it's in the hands that are here.
That helps me sleep at night, that's for sure. All right, you guys. Hopefully we'll see most of you guys this summer at the UC system-wide, which is going to be in Berkeley. And And then we're going to advertise the next Cal Academy lecture, which is going to be by Sam Achalefu, who's just started a new bioengineering program out at UC Southwestern Texas. And he's going to talk about leadership on his end of the causeway.
Awesome.
All right, thanks you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.